Hello, good morning. I'm Matt Addison. I've got David Comerford alongside me today. Welcome to today's daily transfer roundup here on Blood Red. Something new for the summer, obviously replaced the morning bulletin for this week. Still plenty of names, though, for us to talk through as we reach the end of the first week of this sort of format. And obviously, Sadio Mane hasn't yet moved on, David, but still plenty of names being linked as possible successors. Bit about Mohamed Salah as well for us to talk about a little bit later on. But as ever, we're going to pick out a couple of names that are being linked with Liverpool. The first one is Christian Pulisic, which is an interesting one, David. He's a player that I do like, to be honest. I think he does need to score a few more goals for me, for Liverpool to be interested in him. Probably be quite hard for Liverpool to sign him from Chelsea as well, but it's an interesting name, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think back a couple of months when Chelsea were kind of shrouded in uncertainty, really over what was going to happen with the future of the club, then it looked like we could be able to maybe take a couple of their assets, and Pulisic probably would have been a candidate. But now obviously we've seen what's happened with their takeover going through, and it seems like it's going to be pretty seamless for them. So it's probably kind of off the table from that point of view. But I agree that he's an interesting option because whilst he doesn't have kind of maybe the raw end product, I was researching a piece on Minamino yesterday, and I was thinking about comparing him to some other kind of squad players at top teams, and Minamino had actually scored more goals than Pulisic had, albeit against some easier opposition in some cases. So yeah, you're right. There probably has to be more from him in terms of his output. But the moment I always think back to when it comes to Pulisic is the behind closed doors game at Anfield when I think he came off the bench, I want to say, and there was kind of a run where he went past, I think, about 3 or 4 of our players and then put it on a plate for Tammy Abraham to kind of try and ignite a comeback in that game. And it's probably one of the best kind of pieces of skill and runs that we've seen against Liverpool in kind of recent history. And I think those kind of moments would probably stay with Klopp. Obviously, he knows Pulisic already, but we've seen in the past that players who have caused Liverpool problems, and I think Pulisic has kind of above and beyond that particular moment as well. That kind of is something that can inform his transfer decisions, when he sees that. So, yeah, he's always someone that, whilst he hasn't had the consistency of performance that I think Chelsea would have liked since he arrived, he's always someone that I'm kind of a little bit fearful of when we go up against Chelsea. So, yeah, it would certainly be. I think it would be a little bit not risky as such, but like you say, Matt, he hasn't maybe had the numbers that are in line with his talent up to this point.
Yeah, Chelsea spent, I think, about 57, 58 million pounds on him when they signed him. And obviously a lot of people were kind of looking at Liverpool as being a possible destination there. As you mentioned before, Jurgen Klopp has obviously worked a little bit with him in the past when he was obviously still a very young player coming through at Borussia Dortmund. Liverpool made a bid for him as well. I think about 10 or 11 million it was in about 2016. So there is definitely sort of interest there from him. But I don't know, he's one of those players that maybe hasn't quite, like you say, maybe done what people expected him to do. He's not quite ignited yet. But then I suppose that wouldn't necessarily be a drawback, because you could say that, about Mohamed Salah, or you could say that about various other players that Jurgen Klopp has taken on. Do you think if Liverpool were to sign Christian Pulisic, would you back Jurgen Klopp to get more out of him than what his previous managers have?
Well, in fairness, I'd probably back Klopp in almost all cases, to be fair. I think the key thing for me is, does the player have the attitude, that willingness almost to improve it and do what's required. And I think if they have that, then we have in Klopp someone who has proven that he can extract the most from players and maybe take them to a level that they, previously haven't reached or didn't even think they were capable of reaching. So I certainly will back him. And it's like we've both said, is that the talent is clear. I think back to not only the goal at Anfield, but it was kind of within that Premier League restart period, which I think was about 7, 8, 9 matches, something like that. And I'm pretty sure the consensus was that Pulisic was the best player in the league for that, window, kind of a bizarre window in kind of June, July. So, there have been kind of stretches where he has been able to show what he's capable of. It just like we say, it hasn't been on a consistent basis. But I was just looking there. I just quickly looked up when his contract expires. So June 2024. And I think the thing with this is, and we've seen it with Salah this week, he's talking about joining a Premier League rival. If we want to sign a player like this, I think, like a Pulisic, or, we're linked with like Martinelli and Saka as well at Arsenal, for example, that's pretty much our only chance. I think the amount of money that's in the Premier League now, I think it's going to be very, very rare to see an actual conventional transfer between the top six, and especially not, the teams who are going for the title. So I think your best bet of signing one of those players is them not being able to agree a new contract, and then you can kind of, obviously you can't officially negotiate with them because they're in the same league, but you can kind of, there are kind of ways around that, it seems. So that would be, I think, the route to do it if we did. And, he's still a pretty young player as well, isn't he? So 2024, for example, he'd still be in a good window there. So I think if that one was to happen, that's what I'd be looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian Pulisic, very much a player that we know a lot about, and I think I'd certainly be excited if Liverpool did go for him at some point in the future. But I think, yeah, like you say, probably a free transfer might be the only way. But the next player we're going to look at is someone that I don't know a great deal about. I can't say that I've watched him before. Is the Rennes forward Martin Terrier, or Terrier potentially, if you want to use the French pronunciation, which I assume he probably would want us to. But yeah, I don't know much about him, Dave. He scored 21 times last season, 7 assists as well in 46 games. And I suppose the one thing we do know is that Rennes have a pretty good record of bringing players through.
Yeah, I think the key thing with, I'm not an expert on him either, but I've had a look at his stats before we came on. And the thing that kind of jumped out at me was, you see that kind of 21 goals figure and you think, well, hang on, how many of those are penalties? And I think the one that kind of makes you pause is Nicolas Pepe, because when he was linked, he had really good goal scoring numbers in that league. I think he had 19 goals, but some like 7 of them were penalties. So it really, makes a big difference. But Terrier got, I think he's 21 goals, isn't it? And only 2 of them were actually penalties. So, he's scoring, a good amount of non-penalty goals, which is obviously important in terms of, he's not kind of artificially inflating his outputs, if you like. And yes, some of his other numbers look good as well. He's really high for touches in the box, progressive passes received, those kind of things, which to me kind of point to, a player who's, quite intelligent and able to take up good positions to receive the ball in dangerous areas. And his defensive contribution numbers look good as well. But really the thing that is most encouraging, if you're looking at kind of his FBref profile, is if you look at the similar players, number 2 is actually Sadio Mane on there in terms of wingers who are similar to him. So if what Liverpool do is essentially recruit someone who's very much in the same mould as Mane and look to kind of go with what's already worked as opposed to, evolving or trying something new, then I think, he would potentially be an option. He doesn't seem like someone who's going to be, despite his record, probably isn't someone who's kind of top of the range in terms of price tag as well. So that makes him more appealing. So yeah, it's an interesting decision that Liverpool have to make in terms of who they go for. I mean, my personal preference is Nkunku to replace Mane, just because I think he was amazing last season. He can play in quite a few different positions, but yeah, certainly he'd probably cost in the region of kind of 70 million, something crazy like that. So if you're looking for someone who could be better value potentially, and someone who looks like, you look at those numbers and those stats and that style of play could really thrive at Liverpool. So yeah, it looks like a decent option.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing we do know about Liverpool is they don't always go for the obvious option. So it's certainly one that makes sense in that sort of way. But let's finish then with some sort of Mohamed Salah and Harvey Elliott type conversations. Harvey Elliott's been speaking. He says he's been begging Mohamed Salah to sign a new contract. And I suppose, why wouldn't you? That's almost as big as how you replace Mane is can we get Mohamed Salah tied down to a new deal this summer? That's got to be the number one priority, hasn't it, this summer?
Well, it would certainly be a huge comfort to not have that kind of hanging over us. I mean, we've seen how much has been talked about last season. I mean, can you imagine how much it's going to be a story next year if it's still dragging on? So that certainty would be beneficial, I think. And there was something I wrote yesterday with Salah, actually, was that, we think about fans and us being concerned about losing him. And obviously we are, considering he has been our biggest star, for a long time, really. And this prospect of him joining a rival is obviously, it was kind of unthinkable in the past. But I think one thing we maybe haven't appreciated is the players are going to be kind of fretting about this as well. The fact that Elliott has said this, to me, it's kind of a window into negotiations, because it suggests that Salah's kind of indicated to his teammates that he really is unsure if Elliott's kind of pestering him about it. And I think, if you're his teammate and you see, they know how good a professional he is, for example, how much longer he can keep delivering, and they kind of know probably his levels better than anyone. I think it is a real worry to consider the prospect of losing him, especially to a rival. So they're not going to, the fans aren't going to be the only ones holding their breath about it. And hopefully a solution can be reached this summer. But I think it could be one of them where it's kind of this game of brinkmanship, and it's kind of who blinks first. And it might, unfortunately, last a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, I think it's going to go on for a little while, isn't it, yet? I think the one thing that you can say is that probably Mohamed Salah does want to stay. It's just a case of, can Liverpool put together that package for him that he and, crucially, his agents and representatives are happy with as well. But yeah, I'm sure that's not the last that we have to talk about Mohamed Salah this summer. Plenty more rumours, I'm sure, on the way as well over the next few weeks as Liverpool continue to look for that Sadio Mane successor. We'll have all the latest and all the analysis on these shows each morning, on the rest of the Blood Red content as well, and across Liverpool.com. We've got the Blood Red podcast coming up later for you as well. There'll be some chat about Paris still from that. There'll be some stuff about Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane to get into. But I think for this morning, that will just about do us. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you very soon.